Well, the only other application is at Prince William School. An application I thought we had done and dusted before. Those of you who had an opportunity to read the notes I put out will see that planning permission was granted back in October of last year for what is a broadly similar scheme. And at the time, the only thing that we particularly picked up on was some comments made by the police, and we thought that seemed like a sensible idea and went along with it. And our only other point was that if Sport England weren't happy, we wouldn't be happy. Sport England weren't happy initially, but the only real reason they weren't happy is because long jump area, sort of run up, and the actual sort of pit would be lost, though in fact it's not used. It is described as derelict. But then Sport England were reassured because as part of the application we finally got planning permission, that long jump area was relocated to a different area, and that remains part of the current plan. What's slightly depressing about the application, apart from the fact that there were sort of 50-odd documents for this one, was the fact that it seems to have come about because they could no longer afford to deliver the plan that they had originally come up with. The comments that I have made have been largely sort of culled from the design and access statements and planning statements that were submitted as part of those 50-odd documents. I will confess that I struggled with the concept of trying to look at the October plans and then look at the new ones and try and figure out where the detailed money-saving changes were. So I literally haven't done that. I mean, if councillors want to, doubtless we could go back to the original application papers, still up there, you can view it. Because I went back to check on the comments that had been made in relation to the application that was granted. So we could look at it, but I suspect that it might be, I won't say it's going to be difficult to figure out, because part of the change is that under the original plan, the whole of the old sports hall went. And from what I can gather, under the new plan, in order to save some money, they're going to kind of reuse part of it, not so much as the sports hall, but as I think, in essence, part of the ancillary bits that go with it. And it would appear that it potentially delivers a range of things. I mentioned the fact that that includes a dance studio, on the basis that this council operates a dance studio from this building.
What do you call
Yeah, but this will be, I think, we're part of a brand new exercise. So yes, there might be one. Of course, Amble School now has one as well. The town is now extremely well served with dance studios, but I don't think it requires this council to come and say we can't comment on it because we operate a dance studio. It was the view we took back with the previous plan, and I can't see any reason for deviating from that. But I've set out the details of what's in this plan in terms of the building works, and essentially you get a very still a very comprehensive setup. I suppose in line with modern thinking, I'm slightly interested to see that not only do we have full-size male and female changing rooms, but we now have non-binary changing area and an accessible area for the disabled. All of which frankly seems again to make perfect sense. The documentation says that the school intends that out of hours the sports hall can be made available to the community and also for private or commercial lettings. There's also quite a significant chunk of this which is to do with the reorganisation of the car parking area and bus parking area, which is to some degree necessitated by the building works, but was also intended under the original plan and this one to kind of improve flow of pedestrians and vehicles on site. I suspect pretty self-evidently with the view that the one shouldn't come into too much contact with the other. There is a marginal reduction in the amount of parking spaces, though I have to confess that the documentation seemed a little contradictory, because in one section it talked about a reduction to 148 spaces, and in another section it talked about 158, the current number being 161. So I'm not quite sure, and I must admit I just didn't have the enthusiasm to sit there and look at a plan and try and count up 148 or 100 whatever spaces. Perhaps of some significance in all of this are the comments that had previously been made by Highways, who essentially said that even though the number of spaces is not going to be the number we would want it to be, we don't consider we've got grounds to sustain an objection. Which was interesting because I had no idea why they were saying that, because it wasn't made clear from what they were saying. It could be anything from, we are a division of Northampton County Council, we're not sure that we should be objecting to plans for a change to a state school. It just wasn't clear. But anyway, they didn't seem to be too worried with before. Their comments seemed to be otherwise supportive. Police have made a number of suggestions, of which perhaps one of the more obvious was to make sure that there was adequate routes for fire vehicles to access the site. As I mentioned, there were comments from NNC Environment, who had wanted a construction traffic management plan, and from Environmental Protection, who'd sought a construction management plan, with what I might call the usual working hours restrictions, so 8 AM in the morning to 6 PM at night, Monday to Friday, and 8 AM to 1 PM on a Saturday, without work being undertaken generally on Sundays or on bank holidays without getting some kind of special permission so to do. There's quite a bit of the paperwork which looks at the fact that the building as reconfigured doesn't meet entirely the standards which the Joint Core Strategy ideally seeks for new builds of this broad type, i.e. non-residential. Under that part of the Joint Core Strategy which was set out in the note, they do make the point that their comments are subject to economic viability. And of course what's happening here is that the school are saying we can't deliver what we wanted, we're having to trim our sales, and what's more, for financial reasons, we can't entirely meet this either. But it is clear that the plan includes, for example, air source heat pumps, it includes photovoltaic solar system as well. There's quite a lot of paperwork within the application in terms of noise assessment, because the air source heat pump system seems as if it's going to be on the roof. So I suppose there may be issues about, is that likely to cause noise, which might impact on any of the residents around, either opposite or close to the site. The gist of the paperwork being that we don't believe so. Given that we actually, in essence, supported the principle beforehand, I can't believe that we changed our minds and we wouldn't even support the principle, because any improvement to the facility has got to be good news. I think I did mean to include in this document, and I think I actually failed to do it in the end. I think they said that the number of pupils on the roll was something like 1,250 currently, which, bearing in mind the various developments either under construction or planned, is a number that's inevitably going to rise, and that's just from the Amble population, let alone Thrapston or anywhere else that Prince William services. So there, in a sense, we have it. Sport England have said that they're happy with the specification, and all they're looking for is some sort of a community use provision. They have some sort of wording that they suggest. I would imagine that we would endorse that, and we would want this to not just be restricted to the school but to the wider community where compatible. That will open up an alternative to using the Amble school facilities, many of which are open to the public. They're fantastically sports always something to behold. With essentially public access going on to it. We might again want to simply make some comment about taking on board any recommendations made by either police or fire services. We may want to say something, I suspect, about asking environmental people to satisfy themselves that what is proposed isn't likely to cause a noise nuisance, or that there is adequate mitigation for what is proposed. And that essentially is it. Now there is an enormous amount of paperwork there, and we could look at the pictures of what is actually proposed if it's helpful. And as I say, we could contrast it with the previous application if we wanted to do so, in an effort to see just how they integrated that part of the existing facility they don't intend to demolish. In your hands.
Well, I think, Chair, if I may, I think any improvement to the existing site, you've already said, has to be a benefit to the students that are attending the school. You know, I think it's sadly needed. I think the last time we had something to do with their science building. So any investment in any school has to be something we would support, and we'd work with anybody that around making sure that would happen. I'm probably just disappointed that they've had to revisit their original application because they can't probably find the money to do it. But having said that, things have happened with lots of things in the country over the last 12 months that would probably, you can see, they probably revisited their finances.
Yes, I think some of it is simply raw material and labour costs, in fact.
So I personally support it with the caveats you put on, making sure that all the other things are covered.
We welcome the upgrading of
The facility.
facilities.
But I think important we echo Sport England in saying that there should be a requirement to make it available for community.
Well, that's a community asset, a good to the community,
Yeah.
definitely.
And they do need a traffic plan.
Yeah.
Otherwise, heard where
In terms of the management of the works, yes, there needs to be both a proper construction plan and a construction traffic management plan. Because of course, there is only one way in and out of that site. And it means that all the construction traffic visiting it has to come on there somehow off South Road, approaching it from one direction or the other. Preferably, I would hope, from sort of out of town. So coming in from Mill Road and over the South Bridge rather than the North Bridge. Because at least that's...
North Bridge is preferable.
Well, the North Bridge is a better bridge, but
Much
the
better.
problem with that is that then if they come over the North Bridge, they have to go down East Road, they have to go past Waitrose, they have to go past Laxton Junior, and then
But South Road these days is almost impassable. I
do
have
you
to
think
go
East
down
Road is
it
any better?
daily. I think I go down both, south
Hmm.
and west, and South Road is
So perhaps all we should say is that, bearing in mind the practical issues of access from either way,
yes,
we
although
want them to take a very careful look at whether even as you just seem to suggest, some sort of circular route
like the
whereby
buses.
they arrive one way and depart a different
Yeah.
way.
Because we have that for the school buses already.
Yes, well, that would make sense, wouldn't
And timings in the morning are crucial.
Yeah.
Indeed, particularly with buses and everything else, school buses.
Yeah. And you see the gate to the
it? I think
school
one of the
isn't
things,
even on a proper road, it's on a bridleway effectively.
yes,
It's right at the end of Home Road.
it is very
And
much
it's an
an
in-out situation now.
more or less opposite, or just beyond Cherry Grange and
Yeah,
next to
that's the
Beaumont House,
bridleway, yeah.
where it becomes the right way. Yeah,
So,
I think that reading the paperwork that came with this, the company was obviously helping put together this application, was making the point, there are some statutory time limits for how long local authorities have got to deal with a thing like this. And it's clear that they were pushing to have it dealt with in those timescales, because of course it might mean that they could make a start during the school summer holidays.
Yeah.
And they want, I think, to utilise as much of that period as they possibly can for reasons that are self-evident. And I suppose that I don't see exactly how one can make that a bloody condition or part of any specific plan. But I think we would perhaps want to say that we don't want construction traffic around simultaneously with either school drop-off or pick-up times.
Definitely.
well, hence the traffic plans.
Hence, that's going to be part of the traffic plan, yeah. Any other
No,
comments?
No, I mean, I very much agree with what's already been said about supporting this. It does seem to me that it might be a bit of a movable feast in the sense that they're clearly reassessing the plans because they just haven't got the money. And they do point, I think you picked up this interesting phrase, subject to economic viability, that is used. And it may be that there are other changes that are made to things as they go along, but I think we should try and support it as best we can.
Yes, and they do make a lot of points about, which I think included in here, about sort of design features to try to suggest that it would either have a low impact, or indeed, I think the way they put it is that the way they're going to do it actually is almost an improvement on what's already
And
there.
probably the sooner they can make a start, the cheaper it will be.
Yeah.
That must be right, and I'm sure they're extremely conscious of that. Just seems disappointing that if gone from October to May,
Mm.
and in essence, it was over 6 months have been lost. But given it is. Right, well, I think therefore broadly supportive. I look at Lisa and I think she's already thinking, please write this one up. As we're likely to finish relatively early, I'm sure I can get something
Yeah.
later. Planning outcomes. You'll recall the next issue of Full Stoke Oil Road and a planning application that kind of, like I said, other ones won't leave us alone. I suspect we're going to see it again because it's been withdrawn, which suggests that it'll come back in yet another iteration. Whether this one will address our concerns and those of some of the neighbouring owners better remains to be seen, but it's gone for now.
Can I just clarify that? I mean, we agonised over this, as we know, in a previous meeting, and it has been withdrawn. But is this not the one where permission had been granted beforehand, but the permission that was granted is essentially impractical? So am I confusing the applications?
Yeah, nothing. The ground levels weren't right, so the
Yes, I
basis
think
would be.
yes, actually, I think you are right.
It was submitted as if the ground was
Yeah.
completely
Flat.
flat
It was,
throughout,
yes.
whereas in
Um,
It
fact
was
it was on a
submitted
fairly
and
heavy
granted on
slope.
that basis.
Yeah.
Yes, it was granted on that basis, and then I think our view was, you're right,
Yeah.
that
That would
you
be
couldn't actually implement the planning permission because you couldn't do it the way it said, because the ground didn't do what all the plans were based on. Yeah.
So, but given that this one's been withdrawn, where does that leave it? Because it's.
So it leaves the previous, obviously it leaves the previous planning permission in situ,
Even though it can't be carried out.
even though we might believe that it can't be carried out. And whether we want to go to the planning department and say, we note that the application has been withdrawn and we are marginally concerned.
I think that's the point.
We are concerned
That's where I'm
that the applicant might try to use the existing permission in circumstances.
It's
where we don't
already
believe-
gone through to planning enforcement. Every bit of information that
Yeah.
I've had has gone through to planning enforcement, and I've now said to the gentleman that attended the meeting, he will just have to keep on at planning enforcement because the work is still continuing.
Oh,
They're still
right.
carrying on with the work.
Oh, they've started.
Which was your figure.
All the windows
Well,
are
that's,
in
if you
now.
say that's a planning enforcement issue, that's,
Yeah.
His figure.
so that's.
So I said to
they've
him,
started
we've
on
done
that.
as much as we can do for him. He now has to make a pest of himself to planning enforcement, really.
Yeah, I mean, it might be worth, notwithstanding that we have done all of that, that in effect predates the withdrawal of the application, which almost gives us an opportunity to go back and take a second bite of the cherry and say, given that it's been withdrawn, that we are concerned, etc. We know we've drawn your attention to this, that, and the other before. We just want to reiterate that, you know, all of those concerns remain.
Yeah,
That's what I was kind of driving at.
Yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Can you put something together for that as well then? And I'll get that sent out.
Cool, shooting yourself in your foot.
And make you even happier as well. The recording went off and I was messing with the recording, trying to get it back on when you were saying what you wanted regarding Codstock Road as well. So if you could also do that for me, please. Because I missed what you were saying.
Agenda, that's it.
I know.
We just as
We'll be okay.
9 o'clock is my deadline, Chairman.
We'll definitely be
We'll get there now. We'll get there.
Right, so other applications you will see, our recommendations you will see. I don't think any of them are actually objections as such, but overall actually granted. Planning appeals, none. To receive the information and decide the next steps regarding the Northern Gypsy and Traveller local plan, because there is a consultation. This actually, I think, was on the full council agenda, and I suggested that if it had a place anywhere, it was here. And I hadn't actually looked at it at that point. I have looked at it. There's nothing specific specifically Amble related, if I can call it that, in the paperwork. And it might therefore be, taking a slightly parochial view of it, that we don't feel the need to contribute to the consultation. If, however, collectively we have some sort of a commitment to the provision of such facilities or specific views that we do want to convey, then of course it would be appropriate to put something together, and we've essentially got to the end of the month. But I wasn't that motivated, shall we say, even to go through it and processing it for the purposes of tonight, so I haven't actually done that, as you will notice. But does anybody have any strong views about whether we should, as a council, take a view and submit something?
Chair, I think if we don't say something and then a plot of land is found and it fits with something that Northants has written, then that could happen. But I think to have a position where if a suitable site was to be found and also proper steps were taken in relation to it, then we would obviously be open to that dialogue. It's that sort of thing, as opposed to not saying anything at all, knowing that I'd rather be there trying to shape what would happen as opposed to being silent on it. That's just my view.
Yeah, well, I sort of see where you're coming from.
I think we should reply to the effect that we've taken on board and are cognizant about what the plan means.
Well, we could
Yeah.
certainly do that. I mean, what is just going through my mind is that this is the 2nd of May.
May.
So full council is on the 16th. This consultation is on the 31st. Do you want me to take another look at this and see if there is some sort of a potentially brief
Yeah, it's
response
a
to
brief.
it that I could then bring forward, indicating that this committee gave me delegated authority to prepare something to put before full council for its consideration?
I think so.
Right, I'll do that.
Lovely.
Sorry, David.
Happily, that takes us to any other relevant matters for report only, which with a bit of luck shouldn't generate a huge amount of additional work for your chairman. Councillor Chesser.
I don't have anything else.
No, nothing. Chair, thank you.
There's one item relating to the minutes of the previous meeting, which is item 22920102. Sorry, not that one. No, we've done that one. Sorry, not that one. Come back again. Not that one. Try again. The next one, 22920103, Benningfield Court. Which, and I don't know whether we need to note or do anything about it, but the owner of that property mentioned that they knew absolutely nothing about this application, and it's clearly relating to a previous owner.
Well, that should have been picked.
Yeah.
That's what you mean. Yeah.
I
They bought it.
haven't,
You go, they've moved in.
I mean, when I did my usual sort of report, I would have looked at the name of the applicant and so on, and I didn't specifically check to see if it did say that they were or weren't the property owner. I suspect that, I mean, on one level, formally, the time for saying anything more was probably past. But we could, I mean, it won't do any harm to contact planning and say that since we did this,
It's
it
been
was brought to our attention that the applicant, or that the person who says that they own the property, and I think resides in the property,
and definitely resides in the property.
doesn't appear to have been responsible for the application.
No, because wasn't that original application refused? It was refused, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, it's not the first time it's come back.
Yeah, it came back, but it was refused, wasn't it? I thought it was
Or,
refused.
or withdrawn, was it
No, I
refused
thought
or
it
withdrawn?
was refused because of the aesthetics and everything.
From
What
Stoke,
it was
yeah.
supposed to do.
I don't think it was.
Okay,
oh,
so,
Yes. No, you can go to more convoluted history than that. 2021, there was an application that was refused. 2022, there was an application to which we objected. That application was subsequently, in a sense, varied, so we looked at it again in 2023, with it not having apparently been decided in 2022, though I now didn't understand why it hadn't been. And so we commented upon it in 23 and 22 on this application, and there was a previous application which was refused, and we were saying that we didn't feel that the changes that were made when first presented to us in April of 2022 met the objections we had in 2021.
could you argue though, because it was a previous application from a previous owner of a premises, then if a new owner now comes forward, they would have to put their own separate application in to apply for planning permission on that?
Probably not, in as much as the application relates to the property, not the owner. So it seems to me
But that person surely couldn't use that application and all the corresponding drawings and everything else because
well, there might be,
they haven't,
there might be issues around copyrighting, but in a sense, if you bought the property, doubtless you will buy it, as it were, in the knowledge of the planning application, and doubtless with the
I thought they'd been searched.
acceptance of the vendor, and presumably of the person who drew the plans. I can't see any reason why you can't just, in a sense, continue with it.
You can
As I
put
say, it relates to the property,
Yeah.
not the.
Anybody can put plans in on a plan.
So it does say applicant, doesn't it? It does say the applicant's details, name.
Having raised it, and having maybe thought about it a little bit further now we've discussed it, I'm happy to withdraw it because I think it's a red herring. Because if, regardless of whether it's passed or refused, it's up to the current owner of the property to implement it. And if they choose not to, then it's.
Yeah.
Well, that would certainly be true.
So I think it's a red herring. Sorry.
No,
Sorry,
that's
I
fine,
was
fair
saying
enough.
that.
At least we've sort of aired it
Interesting.
and raised it in a slightly interesting point that may or may not occur again. Nothing else?
No, that's it.
One last thing from me, just by way of a bit of information. You will recall that I got delegated authority essentially to draft the response of the town council to the local plan part 2 modification consultation, which is a bit of a mouthful, which was that document was circulated.
Yeah.
Councillor Rycroft was keen that I made sure that Councillor Harrison had seen it. So I forwarded it on to her, and I received a response from her this evening, basically thanking me for bringing the comments to her attention. She said that, if I remember it correctly, that she thought they seemed quite sensible comments, and she said some quite nice things about knowing what hard work it is to carry all through
That's
these
the
consultation documents, etc.,
That's the
etc.
response.
I had a horrible feeling you were going to say that she'd said absolute rubbish, you can't possibly say that.
No, completely the opposite.
Good.
And in fact,
Excellent.
it's not a controversial point, but I do actually continue to be impressed by her, because on the Tuesday night she came to our meeting. On the Wednesday night she was at Blackthorn for their annual parish meeting, where she was asked a number of things and asked to do certain things. And very rapidly, she dealt with certain issues. She came back, she found the right people, she got responses out of them when they had not provided responses to the parish clerk there and so on. So, no, she is quite effective It may well be that she can't give us, as it were, what we want, but at least the effort is made. So it reassures me that she is somebody we need to keep in the loop from time to time with regard to what we're thinking. And that, I think, concludes this evening's meeting at 8:20. Thank you very much.
Thank you.